Hello, ghosts and ghouls, and welcome to the spooky Halloween edition of the $1 Billion Movie Club. Today, I am your host, the great wizard, Flongik. With me tonight is my co-host,
Hi, I'm Happy Eeyore. Something that shouldn't exist, but somehow does.
and welcome to our discussion.
On the Dark Knight.
No, that is not great. It is me, Christian Masinson,
What?
for today's
I
Halloween
did not
episode
see that coming.
of the $1 Billion Movie Club. If you are an audio listener, I was wearing a hat and a beard, which I just removed. And now, because this is the week of Halloween, we must be festive. I will now put on my actual Halloween costume.
Okay, he's putting on a jacket. He's putting on a jacket.
Hey.
What's it gonna be? Ooh, it's a varsity jacket. Oh, he's got the hair slicked back. He's got the sunglasses. What's he gonna do? Ooh, he's getting ready. He's putting it on. He's putting on a little show. Putting the headphones on. He's ready to go.
Hey, I'm Baby Driver.
Wow, this episode's not going to age well at all. It already has aged horribly.
Yeah, that's the only costume I could draw. All right, no more Baby Driver. A film I dislike more and more with each watch.
You know, this episode's going up like 2 days before Halloween, so it's going to be dated the week after it comes out. It's going to be great. It's great.
Pawan, I could watch the Friends episode, the one with the Halloween party, any time of year.
Yeah, but do they syndicate that episode any time of year?
Yes.
I disagree.
My co-host, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, Pawan Mehta.
Hey, it's me. I'm Happy Eeyore. It's me. It's Pawan Mehta. Hey, what's going on?
So I got hair in my mouth.
You got head.
The beard hair was in my mouth.
Nice.
All right.
I mean, I have my actual hair in my mouth, so there we go.
Well, that happens to me all the time too. Anyways, Pawan, you've mentioned already the film we are discussing today.
Yeah, it's got Batman in it.
Christopher Nolan's 2008, The Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm. It's got Batman in it.
For those who are unaware, the film had a budget of $185 million. Released on July 18th, 2008. In its opening weekend, it broke many a record, including opening day, single day record with $67.2 million. That's what happens when you don't have your glasses on. And its opening weekend gross of $158.4 million was the highest grossing opening weekend at that time. It would go on to gross many a dollar. In September of 2008, Reuters, I believe that's the website's name, released an article on September 10th titled "The Dark Knight Plans Re-Release for Oscar Push." In the article, Carl DiOrio, that's a fun name, mentions that the film had grossed $512 million domestically and $448 million international. It was already the second highest grossing film domestically, and there were plans for a January re-release in hopes of increasing Oscar buzz. With that re-release, it made some more money. And on
it did actually have that re-release.
It did. In February 20th, 2009, Warner Brothers released a press release stating, "The Dark Knight achieves a box office milestone. Film crosses a $1 billion threshold to worldwide box office release." Oh, box office revenue. Again, glasses not currently on. Its original release ended with a total of $1.003 billion worldwide. More than half of that just from its domestic gross of $533 million. It was at its top the fourth highest grossing film of all time, second highest grossing domestic film of all time. It currently sits at the 47th highest grossing film worldwide, and yet the 12th highest grossing film domestically. Pawan, what is your history with this film?
All right. So I saw Batman Begins in theaters.
Back in
And
05?
then, yes, I was about 7 at the time.
That's how math works. Go on.
And then The Dark Knight came out. And I wanted to see that in theaters. But my mom was like, no, it's got menace in it. That's too much for your young brain.
There is a lot of menace.
So, well, actually, the MPAA says there's some menace, not too much, just
menace.
some menace. But that was too much for my little brain to handle, so I wasn't allowed to see it. And then, like, my birthday came around the next year or whatever, and I wanted to like get the DVD or something, and my aunt was like, "All right, I'll get you Batman," and she got me Batman Forever on DVD. And then like 2 or 3 years after that, I was out on Black Friday and I saw the Dark Knight DVD for $5. So that's when I bought it and saw it. What's your history?
I meant to ask you for about Batman in general, not just Dark Knight, but let's keep it to just Dark Knight. I don't have many memories of its initial release as a dumb 11-year-old, actually probably more like 10. I finally watched it. I finally went into the Batman deep dive after Batman Arkham City, that video game. And so I did that, Arkham Asylum. Next year, Dark Knight Rises came out in theaters. So I watched the Batman Begins and Dark Knight before that. This is the first film in this podcast I've seen before the podcast started. And since then, I've done, I think I only did one rewatch for the 10th anniversary. And then today I did another rewatch. Well, yesterday, not today.
Oh, wow.
Yesterday.
Yeah, it's been 12 years since this movie was released.
It's a 12-year-old film. It's an old film. Juan, what is your history with Nolan or any of the actors within this film?
My history with Nolan started with Batman Begins. Which another thing about that, by the way, I got the Batman Begins video game around the time that movie came out.
Yes.
And that game, severely underrated. I'm pretty sure it's actually developed by the team who made Dead Space.
Which is a weird follow-up to a movie tie-in, but...
I mean, they were given a lot more... it was a lot more ambitious.
Sure.
But like EA trusted them and then eventually destroyed them.
Yes, they did. How terrible. For those of you who don't know video games, imagine that someone may, Nolan, after doing Batman Begins, did Alien.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair
comparison.
Yeah. By the way, I rewatched Batman Begins because I haven't seen it in a long time on a Monday to like get some background for this movie. And while I was watching the movie, I was like noticing snippets of scenes that were actually also in the video game. And like those are the only moments I knew line for line.
As cutscenes in the video game?
Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And like those are the snippets I knew line for line. And it just made me want to play the video game, but I have it for the original Xbox. And my original Xbox no longer works. So sad times.
Very sad times. That's the saddest thing about the times right now.
Yes.
Is your inability to utilize the Xbox. That is
But you know what? As happy Eeyore, I persevere.
With the spirit of the happy Eeyore. Oh. I don't know what just happened.
The spirit came over you.
Oh God, the spirit is taking over me. I like it.
So what about you with the broader Batmans?
I think the question was about Nolan and the actors.
It was.
But Nolan, I've unexpectedly, because 3 of his films is one franchise, I've seen a majority of his films. Um, with I've seen every since Batman Begins, with the exception of The Prestige and Tenet, which no one in their right mind has watched yet.
What are you talking about? Pirate Bay.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. That is a correct mind. You're correct. But yeah, this is how I think of Nolan, right? Typically, I respect him as a filmmaker, what he does with the camera and creating tension and action. I do not respect what he does with the English language. Never the
Yeah, I
biggest fan of
agree.
his
That's
scripts.
an apt way to put it. Yeah,
I
I've also seen a fair amount of Nolan myself. A lot of it seems to be caught up so much in the ideas and trying to be like uh cool and different
Mhm.
and like heady
Mhm.
more so than presenting a great story by itself.
Yeah. I think going off that, yeah, it's all the ideas and then the spectacle. I think the spectacle is what gets people in. And then because it's heady, people are like, "Oh, this is very smart. This is incredible." But there's always a touch of humanity and heart that I find missing. That he will
Yes.
attempt, which we will get into later on
Oh
with
my
this
god.
film specifically, because I have thoughts about that. Um, Thoughts on Christian Bale, Michael Caine,
You know
Maggie
what, before we
Gyllenhaal.
get into that, I want to give an example of how much I hate Christopher Nolan attempting heart.
It's gonna be the one I think it is, isn't it?
It's Interstellar.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Anne Hathaway saying we need to make this decision because my love compels me to go in this direction. And love is the greatest compass of all, which goes against all the hard science that the rest of the movie was preaching and is extremely out of character for most of the characters in that film.
Have you rewatched this film since we watched it back in 2014?
No,
I'm curious if you would still think I haven't rewatched it either.
I've seen that scene since, and it does not hold up by itself.
But since I was rewatching the scene of Dark Knight just like 10 minutes ago, and it felt completely different because it was out of context of the entire film.
I guess.
So I don't know. I get with Dark Knight specifically. I watched it back in 2012. Thought it was incredible. Watched it again, 2018. Was like, oh, that's not as great as I remember. And I remembered liking. I ended up liking it a lot more this time than I thought I would. Thoughts on Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Heath Ledger, Morgan Freeman, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Aaron Eckhart, Gary Oldman,
Aaron
etc.
Eckhart, I very much enjoyed him in that movie. Thank You for Smoking. That
He
was
is
a
in
good
that film.
movie.
I have not seen that film yet.
It's a fun dark comedy that turns into a drama. Spoilers.
Sure. Well, I think it's assumed we always talk about spoilers of any movie we discuss and bring up on this podcast.
Fair enough.
For example, Luke has a lightsaber in the Star Wars trilogy.
For example, Luke is a Skywalker.
For example, Luke has a cool hand.
Just a singular one.
I don't know what the movie Cool Hand Luke is about.
Oh, that's what you're referencing. I thought you were referencing the fact that, he gets his other arm cut off.
I noticed that as I said it and was wondering if I could play it off as me being smart and implying two different things. Did it work?
That's what the best writers do, and I have to applaud you for that.
Thank
Even
you.
though
Thank
my
you.
mind didn't initially go to Cool Hand Luke, pretty sure there are some film historians out there listening or watching. You know who you are.
Leonard Maltin. Roger Ebert from The Grave.
Sure.
Thank
Those
you for
peoples.
listening. I respect both of you very much.
So going back to the actors, I don't remember most of what the other people have been in.
Christian
Like
Bale.
I've seen 310 to Yuma. That was solid. Like
Bale's in it, or is Ledger in it?
I think
Not both,
Bale's
right?
in that one. Yeah, Bale's in that
Bale's
one.
in that one.
I don't think I've seen anything Heath Ledger's in other than this.
Yeah, same.
Like I haven't seen Brokeback Mountain.
I haven't either, and I feel bad as a cinema fan that I have yet to watch it. And also as an Asian because Ang Lee directed it.
Fair enough.
That's a fact. But yeah, one of the things I noticed in this rewatch is that this is very much an ensemble film in a way the Batman Begins wasn't. It's jumping around from Bruce's point of view. You get some of Harvey Dent, some of Rachel, etc. Joker. It really is everyone bringing it in, and Nolan has an incredible cast of just solid players that you know are always going to do great work.
Well, the thing is, I feel like Batman Begins was so caught up in trying to tell the origin story of Batman in the most expedient way possible that you didn't have time with any of the characters.
Yes. But again, that one felt more Bruce focused than like you got many moments with Alfred or Rachel by themselves in the same way you get them in this.
Yeah, I mean,
we also just went straight into analysis. So put your analysis glasses on as we continue this analysis.
there it is.
Cool.
So, yeah, the first movie, like the first hour of Batman Begins, is all over the place.
I agree completely.
Like, the thing with these origin stories is that, like, if you're going to do the origin story as the first movie every time, try to switch it up a little bit.
I will say, they're not making this film in 2020. They're making this film in 2005. People think of Batman as Batman and Robin, George Clooney, Batnips. They need a refresh,
which is great.
I'm not saying it's bad, but that's not what Nolan's going for. And so, I think it's fascinating to see the success of Batman Begins and Dark Knight. That it's typically cited as the reason for dark, gritty reboots of stuff like James Bond after.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the prototype for the Snyderverse.
Very much so. Very much so.
Like, it was interesting watching this movie and seeing that influence so much stronger, because it feels like going back and watching this movie now, it feels like a much lighter version of the Snyderverse to the point where it is
Dark Knight.
Dark Knight.
Dark Knight. Okay.
To the point, well, both to a certain extent. It feels like a more palatable version of the Snyderverse.
Huh. I've only seen one film in the Snyderverse, Batman v
because
Superman, so I can't.
Because when it comes to Batman Begins, Man of Steel is basically the first hour of Batman Begins, but for most of its runtime.
Never seen Man of Steel. I have nothing to add.
Because Man of Steel and Batman Begins, they jump around so much. Because it's the idea that it's not that these scenes might not be interesting in themselves, so you got to rush through them as quickly as possible, but in putting them side by side with these other ones, it'll elevate it, but it's very easy to get lost in it.
May I ask you, in the realm of Batman Begins versus Dark Knight, the film that we are discussing?
Sorry.
Is it me, or is Batman Begins more comic booky, quote unquote, than Dark Knight? Because I found that there was a supernatural elements with the League of Shadows, with Scarecrow and his toxins, that is completely missing from the later Nolan films, unless maybe more.
Do you not remember Dark Knight Rises?
Well, I was gonna say maybe other than Ra's al Ghul stuff in Rises, but Dark Knight, there's no supernatural element.
I mean, yeah, this movie is even within its trilogy, it is an extreme outlier.
And then just color-wise, there are a lot of like these amber dark scenes in Batman Begins, and I found everything a little more naturalistically lit in this film.
I will say in Batman Begins, like the city of Gotham didn't necessarily feel like a city here, Whereas in The Dark Knight, it's just straight up Chicago.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Even though both were probably filmed in the same place. Like I think
Oh, I believe they're at different places.
No, but I'm pretty sure like the chase scene underground, like there's one in both movies, and they're like they look very similar in the backgrounds. Like I'm pretty sure they were shot in the same place.
My understanding was that Batman Begins was shot in one city, and then Dark Knight was shot in like 3 different cities. I don't have the specifics right here, but maybe I'm wrong. But no, I'm looking at Dark Knight right now. I'm seeing Chicago, London. So they jumped around for locations in Dark Knight.
Yeah, but yeah, there's that underground scene. That was definitely shot in Chicago because I remember that being in the first Watch Dogs game as well.
I like that.
I haven't been to Chicago myself, but I have deeply explored
a virtual
that realm. Yes.
In Ubisoft's 2013, 2014 video game Watch Dogs.
Yeah, it came out around the time the PS4 did.
Watchdog Legion coming out this week. Sponsor us, Ubisoft. Or not, you're kind of a terror.
Yeah, let's not go into that.
Back to The Dark Knight.
Mhm.
One thing I need to point out, because it's not streaming anywhere, and so both of us have a Blu-ray copy of it. Yes.
I have a DVD copy.
Oh, you have a DVD copy of it. Okay, so
it's one of them old ones where it's like widescreen and like the top and bottom are cut off.
So this is the Blu-ray copy of it. This is my grandpa's Blu-ray. Thank you.
Wait, is that a steelbook?
Yes, it is a steelbook. I think he got it at like a flea market because that's where he buys all his stuff.
He got a steelbook at a flea market.
It's 2 discs.
Crazy.
Anyways, so this is what I discovered rewatching it in 2018. On the Blu-ray copy of the movie, the scenes Nolan shot in IMAX are in full screen, and then the rest of it is in widescreen, which is an odd shift, mainly because most of the IMAX scenes are the establishing shots of the landscape.
Yeah.
And then there would be weird scenes where it's like when he breaks Lau out of
the one in Shanghai, I think it is.
But the sequence of him breaking in and taking Lau and shooting him up, it's like IMAX.
It cuts back and forth.
Yeah, it cuts back and forth between the IMAX and the widescreen, and it's just disorienting watching it now. Where it's like, okay, I've seen films play with these formats in artistic ways. Shout out to Defy Blood.
Oh, another great example of that is It Comes at Night, where the screen actually gets smaller and smaller over the course of the movie.
I might watch that this week for Halloween week. But yeah,
it's worth it.
It's very disorienting when it's just unnecessarily shifting from widescreen to 3 seconds of the Hong Kong skyline to widescreen. Well,
don't you want to see as much of the Hong Kong skyline as you can?
But even then, it's when he's breaking out Lau, it's the sequence of him breaking the window and bursting out, which is like an unnecessary scene to look fancy.
Well, listen, he just wanted to highlight the city. It was in China, right? Yeah, it was Hong Kong.
Hong Kong? That's a... yes, technically, yes.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah.
That's another murky... We're entering so many murky areas today on the $1 Billion Movie Club's Halloween episode. Ooh. But go on.
Didn't I tell you that was going to happen as well? And this isn't even what I was talking about.
Oh, no, I know. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. But you were saying...
what was I saying?
Something about the IMAX in Hong Kong.
Oh, yeah, because China is growing as a marketplace in terms of movie earnings. So maybe they were trying to be like, ooh, we look nice in the one scene we're over here.
Let me do some quick research to make sure I'm right, but I think this is before the China
boom.
The China boom in Hollywood, which we will see later on, explicitly in films like Iron Man 3 and Transformers.
All of them.
Age of Extinction. Is it all of them? But I believe this is before China was a big presence in the box office. Remember, half of this film's box office was domestic.
Though another thing that I think we should note that we haven't brought up yet, this is the first superhero movie
Oh yes, the
that
very
is
first.
in this series. The first of many. Of
Many.
many.
How? First up, what?
Of many.
Many.
At least 7.
Teen. 100.
Yeah, this show is never ending.
This is one of 3 DC films, though, which I think is an interesting. I believe that's the number, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly. This Dark Knight Rises and Aquaman being 4. Sorry.
Yeah, Joker.
Joker.
Come on. How are you
Which
going to
is-
forget the man we're talking about today?
It's a topic we will tackle today.
I think this is the only movie where that we're going to talk about on this podcast where we follow a villain specifically in the preceding episode. Sorry, in the next episode.
What?
That word. In the sequel episode.
The sequel episode, which will be like 40 weeks from now.
Yes.
Cool. I want to talk about the cast and their performances. Before the obvious one thing I always thought was strange was the recast of Rachel in these films.
Yes. I
It was
agree.
Originally, Katie Holmes replaced with Maggie Gyllenhaal. Do you have any thoughts on them?
I feel like Katie Holmes didn't get much of a chance because she didn't have much to do in the first movie.
Yeah, I agree. I agree very much so.
And then in this one, you know, usually when they replace a role, it's because the actor's not in it for the long haul.
Well, so this is I did some research because it seemed so weird that they switched it. It seems like it was simply just scheduling issues. Like she was planned to come back for Dark Knight and it just didn't work out.
That makes sense. That reminds me of Hugo Weaving not returning for Red Skull.
Oh, I thought he just didn't like those movies.
Well, it was also the fact that like they weren't willing to budge on the schedule in terms of because he had much better gigs.
That is a big deal. But yeah, I found Gyllenhaal to be a lot tougher in this film than.
Well, I think
previous.
It's not necessary. It's partially the actress, but I think a lot of it comes from the script and like what she's asked to do in this one as opposed to the previous one.
But there is an air to Gyllenhaal that there's more bite to her than a Katie Holmes. Katie Holmes is a softer actress just from these 2 films.
Yeah, she's got a baby face.
And so I don't know. I am curious if there's ever going to be a Nolan cut.
Yeah. Oh God, no.
Where we see Katie Holmes come back, but I thought Maggie Gyllenhaal had the right fight in her that was necessary for this film.
Especially in that one scene where Joker mentions that she has fight. It was kind of necessary.
Is that in the fundraising scene?
Yes.
Yes. I have a question for you about that scene
Mm-hmm.
because I was listening to a podcast once.
Once.
And they're talking about how in that scene, Joker drops Rachel,
Mm-hmm.
Batman jumps, grabs her, they land in a car. And she has some weird quip. Yes? What happens after that?
Wait, which quip?
I forget what it is. But she lands on the car. Joker goes there to look for Harvey. He doesn't go there for Batman or Rachel.
He just goes around. He just goes around vamping for a little while. He's like, "Yeah, these people know I'm the Joker, baby." Then he leaves.
And Bruce put Dent in like a closet and put a broom in between the handles, and Joker didn't see that.
Because he killed the henchman before the henchman could tell him.
I guess.
Chaos.
Question about Christian Bale.
Mhm.
Is he the most apathetically received superhero actor? Because I don't think anyone dislikes him, But I feel like no one raves about him in the way that some may about other
I
actors.
feel a lot of it comes from his decision of voice as Batman.
That does color a lot of it.
Because boys, it's so childish. And like it's like when your 13-year-old boy tries to pretend like he's a big tough dude.
And just tries to drop the voice lower before the ball's dropped.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, everyone jokes about the voice, but no one's like, he's a bad Batman.
No, because like honestly, I think he's a better Bruce Wayne.
I'll go with that. I enjoyed his Bruce Wayne. There's a lot of fun playfulness he has to it, and a lot of nonchalance to it. I think.
Not that these movies give many scenes to it.
I found there were a lot more in this than I remembered. But also, I remember this as the Joker movie. You know,
Right.
I think that's also a big part of it, is that Joker rules Dark Knight. Dark Knight Rises is ruled by Bane, and so
I don't know if that's the case.
hold on. Tell me one line Christian Bale says in The Dark Knight Rises.
I think it's time for the Dark Knight Rises.
You know what Bane says? Bane goes, I was born in the shadows. Oh. And we will discuss that film in detail in maybe like 12 weeks or something.
Yeah, not long because that came out like 4 or 5 years later.
2012, baby. So I think it's time for us to talk about the elephant in the room, the Academy Award-winning performance by one Heath Ledger.
Would you like to start?
What are you gonna say? Oh no! I have scenes noted of his brilliance in this film, and I do think the weird thing about Heath Ledger's performance is that there's this sheen of mysticism around it, because he did die before the film came out. There's all these stories of the things he did to get into character. I think there's always an aspect when people talk about Dark Knight and the Nolan trilogy of this being the first quote unquote film for a lot of people. For the people who mainly go to blockbusters, they'll come to here and it's the first one to, like, I feel like will challenge them in some ways, or at least try to.
That's what I hate about Nolan so much.
Well, anyways, when I think of why Heath Ledger's performance stands out, I think of the scene when he first goes to the mobsters and does the magic trick. And there's the one guy who's like, "Oh, I want you dead. 500 dead, 1 million alive." And everyone in that scene is playing this cartoony, over-the-top mobster to the most serious degree that they can, but there is a level of camp in it.
Yes.
And then here comes Ledger's Joker, who's outlandish, but it doesn't feel like he's chewing scenery. To me, it feels grounded in a way that a lot of the other performances in that scene aren't. And I think there's a weight to his performance. There is very much a menace and a level of fear of the unpredictability of it, whether it's what he's going to do next, or when's the next time he's going to that weird lip thing where he like lips his bottom lip and does that. And that's why I think that performance stands out in the film, in the comic book genre in general, is because it is grounded in this kind of I don't give a fuck seriousness.
Right. See, that's the main thing. I don't know if I'd call it seriousness.
Okay, go on.
Because I genuinely had a laugh and enjoyed.
Oh.
It felt so fun watching Joker. Nothing felt serious.
It's scary how much fun and how alive he is. I think of the first time I watched this movie, it was on this like tiny square television. I was either watching it on cable or it was recorded on the DVR. And it's the scenes of his ransom videos where they're handheld and he's like showing it, and it's very shaky. And I was hiding under my blanket. I was like 15 watching this, afraid of what he's gonna do next.
Well, that's the menace for you.
It's the seeming unpredictability of the role, which I
Mhm.
think the character fascinates me because I think this is why everyone watched this movie. This is why everyone watched Joker, because it's about Joker. But there's a weird fascination we have with this character, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why.
Yeah, Joker is a little overhyped. I mean, that statement by itself means nothing. But going back to Heath Ledger's performance and the whole mysticism behind it, whenever there's a cultural fascination with the acting of a movie, I find it's usually with like, oh, it was so real and all that aspects, like going into method acting.
Are we touching the button of method acting?
Yes, we are.
As someone who went to acting school and trained in the method,
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about how method acting is shit.
but it's not. All right. So the method was a technique.
I'm
That
not talking
Lee
about
Strasberg,
Stanislavski
well, Lee Strasberg
by that.
created, and it's
Uh,
based off creating, personalizing and connecting with the material based off your past life, past memories, and creating that reality that helps you connect to the scene. And somehow along the way, the press turned method acting into I'm my character the entire time while filming.
right. And that's what gets the most clicks and views and all that information about how acting occurs,
Yes.
which leads to a lot of people who don't really know much about the craft of it to think that the best actors are the ones that are fully embody the role and can only do one every few or so years because they're too
Who would
tied up
even
in it.
who'd even because the thing is people equate like Christian Bale's weight gain and loss for a role with method acting, which isn't a thing.
Right.
Just because De Niro did that for Raging Bull and is a method trained actor, they equate that.
Well, I
But
think it's mostly for cases like what I'm talking about is like the one of the two Jokers we're not going to talk about on this podcast in its
Mr.
own
Leto,
episode.
Mr.
Yes.
Leto. But my thing with Jared Leto is I don't remember people saying that about Dallas Buyers Club.
They
I
did. I remember that.
They were saying he was doing method acting for Dallas Buyers Club.
Well, I know they mentioned the weight a
But
lot.
that's not the living in character at all times. You know, I don't remember people saying that about Blade Runner 2049. I don't remember people. I doubt people said that about like My So-Called Life.
They definitely said it about Suicide Squad though,
Yeah, but
and how much of a terrible person he was to his fellow co-stars.
he was, because those are very unprofessional things to do. But again, that how much of that is just the weird fascination we have with the Joker character. You are right that there is some method acting. Oh my god, but that's mainly Daniel Day-Lewis, who I don't think anyone dislikes.
Yeah, see the thing is it definitely is just the skill of the actor to begin with. It has nothing to do with using this technique
Yeah.
as it is considered. What was I going on about?
We're talking about Heath Ledger and why you didn't like the performance.
I didn't say I didn't like it.
Go on.
I said I didn't like the mysticism attached to it.
Sure.
Because to me, it's just a really fun take. That's about it. Like, I wouldn't say it's this groundbreaking thing. And I don't recall what other movies were there that year, but I do agree it was a really good performance. So it makes sense why he got that Oscar.
Let's take a second to talk about the Oscars, because this is arguably one of the most influential films in Oscars, weirdly enough. So
How so?
as mentioned before, it had the
Oh, in
re-release.
terms of
Well, no. It had the re-release in January for an Oscars push. They really wanted Best Picture, Director, etc., etc. The film was nominated for 8 Oscars, breaking the record of most nominations for a film based off a comic book, comic strip, or graphic novel, previously held by Dick Tracy, who had 7 nominations. Do you have thoughts on it? I've never seen it.
I haven't seen it, but it's of course it would be the like comic book movie that's very close to old style Hollywood.
Sure. So it had 8 nominations, nominated for art direction, cinematography, sound mixing, visual effect, makeup, and film editing. 2 wins in sound editing and supporting actor for Heath Ledger. People were pissed that this was not nominated for Best Picture.
And that's
it was
why
a talk.
they changed the entire system for nominating Best Pictures, right? They
Yeah, well,
increased the number of nominees.
It was only 5 nominees. Let me just double check because Slumdog Millionaire won that year. That was the year of The Reader.
Oh God, the Slumdog Millionaire.
Fun fact: the one award Slumdog Millionaire lost was to Dark Knight for sound editing, which is a weird one. So yeah, that year it was Slumdog Millionaire, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Frost Nixon, Milk, and The Reader. How often do people talk about any of those movies? Specifically,
I guess, yeah.
Frost, Nixon, Milk, and The Reader. And people were pissed that Dark Knight and Wall-E weren't nominated for Best Picture. And so the next year, you'll see it widen to 10. You'll see stuff like Avatar, Hurt Locker, Precious.
Oh yeah, Avatar
nominated.
was next year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's next year. But then you also see stuff like District 9 slip in. Up becomes the second animated film to ever be nominated for Best Picture. And so, yeah, it's weirdly influential in the Oscar landscape, The Dark Knight. Also, if you haven't watched Hugh Jackman's opening number from the 81st Academy Awards, it is the perfect opening number for an award show. Hugh Jackman is charismatic, hilarious. The song is written by people like Dan Harmon and Ben Schwartz. It's the weirdest, most fun thing for any movie lover to go back and watch that.
Well, it's got to be better than the opening. Well, I don't remember if it was opening, but that one song from Seth MacFarlane where he was talking about seeing boobs.
It's such a weird opening. It was him trying to fight the future headlines of him sucking as a host. So William Shatner comes back from the future, showing him what he did to get the bad headlines. And so it's a weird around way of doing the shitty stuff, but not doing the shitty stuff, I guess.
I see, yeah. Lampshading it.
Yes. And going back to Heath Ledger, he won the Oscar that year. He swept every major award, if I'm correct.
What was nominated against him?
I was about to say he beat Michael Shannon for Revolutionary Road, Philip Seymour Hoffman for Doubt, Josh Brolin for Milk, and one of my personal favorite nominations, Robert Downey Jr. for Tropic Thunder. Yes, Ledger.
There's a similar fun to both of those performances.
I wish we could talk about Tropic Thunder because I hold that Downey Jr. performance up there as one of my favorites of all time. And not just in a comedic level. I think he does brilliant, deep emotional work with that role.
Exactly. We're talking Tropic Thunder and Doolittle. Top performance.
I wish I saw Doolittle. I wish Doolittle was the last movie I saw in a theater.
That would have been interesting. That would have been nice.
Should we get back to the movie?
Yes.
Any other fun things? We barely touched this film.
Yeah, we've barely talked about it. I mean, it's a little bit of apprehension to discuss some of the heavier themes.
One thing I noticed with Nolan films, especially with the first 2 Batman, because I mentioned I find that he's lacking in human emotion in a lot of these movies. There's always weirdly placed humor in these movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the big underground undertunnel chase scene in the cars, right?
Oh, where he's exploding all the vehicles?
Yeah. Where there's Joker pulling out the bazooka, and there was a joke with that I enjoyed. But then it cuts to these two kids pretending to shoot stuff in the car, and then Batman like shoots something with his motorcycle, and they're like, "Whoa!" I'm like, that just did not fit the flow of this movie at all.
Yeah, it also feels weird that like the amount of property damage does not get mentioned at all.
Yeah. Well, that's a superhero thing that they just ignore until mid 2010s, right?
Oh, I remember it being the big plot point of the beginning of Batman v Superman.
Yeah, Batman v Superman and Civil War kind of touches on that as well, right?
Yeah.
And I believe those were the same year.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I Nolan humor always out of place for me typically. I just said always and typically in the same sentence. So that's the mind that's speaking to this.
Listen, this is the Halloween episode. It doesn't have to make sense because it's spooky.
Oh, it's a spooky episode.
So one thing I wanted to touch on is how this movie treats criminals.
Go on.
The way the prison system is utilized in these films is so it's connected with how people feel about it in terms of like they see a criminal, it's like lock them up, make sure they never get out. But like that's not really what the prison system is for.
Does all right. You really just opened up a can of worms.
That's why I've been apprehensive to go into anything really with this.
Here's what I'm gonna bring up. I'm gonna open up where I found this. Vamp for 2 seconds, please.
Yeah, it's a big part of these movies where there's this sentiment that's like if they're a criminal, they belong behind bars and there's no chance of redemption or reformation. And the idea is that they don't get let out, they escape, which is why they belong in it again.
Do they escape in this one? Batman Begins, they escape, but they don't escape in this one, right?
Well, the thing is, they're still escaped in this one. There's apparently a lot of them that are just out there.
Yeah,
like
but
Scarecrow is
those
here.
Those are the ones from the first movie.
Yes.
They said that they at the end of Batman Begins, they say, "Hey, we couldn't even get half of them. Scarecrow is still running around." So it's not like they escape in this movie.
But it's still the idea that like there's no way for these people to be reformed. It's just which even the people in the ship bring up.
But doesn't it complicate it because of the ship? Because the criminals don't do it when they were expected to?
But like even the civilians on the other ship make the comment that they made their choice. They chose to do the evil things as if there's no underlying systemic reason why they would.
But it's not presenting that ship as being in the right.
I think it was presenting that viewpoint as correct, though.
No.
Because it's a prevailing idea throughout these movies.
Now let me find a quote I found from Nolan. Nolan has denied the film and insists that none of his Batman films are intended to be political. I've had as many conversations with people who have seen the film the other way around. We throw a lot of things against the wall to see if it sticks. We put a lot of interesting questions in the air, but that's simply a backdrop for the story. What we're really trying to do is show the cracks of society, show the conflicts that somebody would try to wedge open.
See, that's a cop-out.
But I also don't think it's crazy to think that he wasn't trying to be political. I think he's trying to adapt a comic book movie and make it a little more grounded. He said with these movies, he wants to make movies that he would have liked to watch as a 12, 13-year-old.
That says a lot, first of all. And secondly, just because you don't intend something to be there doesn't mean it's not.
Oh, I'm not saying
that's not an acceptable way of viewing it.
Sure, it's art. Art is open to interpretation. Every interpretation is correct. But I also don't think either ship is presented heroically or as a villain. I think they're both presented as complex uncertainties. Is that not so? So the weird thing about these Nolan movies I've noticed in rewatching the first two is that they are about the the innate good of humanity. The first one, Raj Al Ghul, is like, "No, Batman, you'll never win because you can't kill anyone," and then he wins at the end. And then in this one, Joker is expecting both ships to blow up. It's the other, and it never happens.
I guess my thing is I just get caught up in the extreme amount of negativity because that's so. It feels like the potential good is always left as subtext rather than text.
Uh, can you give an example of potential good?
The idea that that both ships are filled with people who want to see the. You know what? I retract that statement.
Because so much of this film is about quote unquote who people really are,
Mhm.
and a lot of what Joker does is bringing them close to that to death to see how they react. You know, I know the squealers, and you're one of them. And then Lau squeals at in Gotham's police station, and so you see, yeah, he's expecting the worst. He thinks he can predict human beings and what they can do, because typically he can. He manipulated Harvey Dent into becoming Two-Face. But there is this element of hope. And I don't usually think of Nolan as an emotional filmmaker per se, but this recent rewatch, I got it. It hit me in a way that I wasn't expecting. I think of the Rachel Harvey explosion scene, right? I completely forgot that after Joker gives the addresses, Gordon, who's not a commissioner, right? I don't think he's a commissioner till like halfway till this in this movie.
Yeah.
Gordon goes to Batman. He's like, "Hey, where are you going?" Batman's like, "Rachel." And so Batman goes thinking he's going to save Rachel, but finds Harvey. In this moment of life and death, Batman selfishly goes after Rachel over Harvey. Then you get the scene of him grabbing Harvey. Harvey's trying to fight. He's angry about him being saved and Rachel probably not, because Batman's not saving Rachel. And Rachel's just trying to calm down Harvey. There's this odd, relaxed nature to Rachel in that scene, kind of. She's trying to calm him down, as if she knows Batman will save them, as if she knows that Bruce will save her because he loves her. And there's this moment when Batman breaks in, Harvey yells no, and Rachel takes this breath. And the reality of the situation hits her. And then she goes back to calming Harvey as this supportive person of the people. You know, she's a DA. I think she's like a lawyer, right, of the people.
Yeah. Assistant to the DA.
Yeah. And so she realizes that it's the end, and she's still trying to calm Harvey down.
Mm.
And I don't know, something about that hit me that in a way I never thought it would. And then I rewatched the clip like 10 minutes before we started this podcast, and it didn't feel the same outside of the context of the rest of the film.
Well, one scene that stuck out to me was the courtroom scene where they arrested like 500 people, I think it was.
Yeah.
And how ridiculously stacked the deck was against them. That was not a fair trial. There's no way it could have been fair.
I'm trying. Those are all people Lau told them were criminals, right?
Yes.
But again, it's the evolution I saw from Batman Begins and Dark Knight, in which Batman Begins is more comic booky, black and white, and then Dark Knight brings it a little more into the real world and adds more complexities. Yes, there's this straight line between good and evil in the beginning, and then you see Two-Face cross the line and go back and forth. You see the two ships, and they have this internal struggle. It's weirdly about the unpredictability of humans, and optimistically saying that in the end, good will triumph for the most part. For the most part, Harvey.
Another thing that I got out of this movie is the idea that if it's the prevailing theme I got, well, one of them is that as long as you don't murder, every other tool is fine as long as you're doing it for the greater good.
How so?
Because my boy Batman goes over to another country and like kidnaps someone to arrest them.
Yes.
And that's treated as a cool sequence, not as the horrible act it really is.
But the film presents Batman's actions as questionable. I think of
it presents it as questionable, but even so, it's the idea is that it's fine and it's good because they actually succeed in the end. For example, the end with when
Lucius.
he did the sonar thing,
Yeah.
which literally spied on everyone in Gotham.
Yes. Well, the world, not just Gotham. The world.
No. Specifically for that, they tied all the phones in Gotham.
Okay, I thought it was the world. I'm wrong.
I mean, the implication is that he could easily do it with the world, but he wouldn't need to because he needs to do it within Gotham. That's where Joker is, and that's why it's worth doing that. The point in the movie where that comes up is when Alfred is talking about how he caught the thief in Burma. They had to burn down the entire forest, and it was worth it.
But Lucius calls him out on it. It does have that weird thing of like putting your name in it. It's all erased. I think it's weirdly about the inner good. Because
yeah, but it is about the inner good, but it's fine whatever means you have to use to get there.
No, that's a good question.
Another thing that I want to bring up is how
I don't think I'm done with this. I'm not done with this. Because I weirdly think this relates to Rachel's letter.
Mm-hmm. How so?
Based on my analysis of the Rachel death scene, I think Rachel wants to be with Bruce, but gives it up because she knows it's the quote unquote right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Alfred knows he should probably give Bruce the letter, but the right thing that he needs is to think of the lasting hope of Rachel, and then them possibly getting together. And so there's a lot of questions of this movie, including the surveillance thing, which it's weird that this is in like a pre-Snowden world, right? Am I weird? Is it? I'm not crazy in thinking that it's weird that
No,
Nolan probably would think about it differently now that all that came out.
I don't necessarily know if he would, but like I'm not here to speculate what he himself thinks.
But yeah, there's a lot of, again, it's taking the comic book world where all the answers feel simple and introducing this tinge of gray, this moral ambiguity, and where you choose what's right and wrong, and kind of hoping for the best in the end, right?
one other thing I want to bring up and associated with this is the only time that someone who's done like who's considered a bad person, a criminal, is given a moment of justification and like reason why she did it is when it was a cop.
I had a feeling we were going to touch the cops. Because there's a scene when Harvey is like, I'm Batman. And right before one of the cops like, yeah, let's not have the cops dying anymore. I'm like, That
Yeah,
scene plays a very, very differently in 2020.
this movie is very pro cop, obviously.
But again, doesn't it question her actions? Yes, she was forced to do it because she needed money for her mom's surgery or something, right?
Was she one of the ones who survived?
Yeah, he flips the coin, and it looked like he just knocked her out. I don't think he killed her in the same way he killed everyone else. Harvey with Ramirez,
Exactly.
I
The
think,
film itself was making a judgment.
was it? Because this
So Harvey is about, like leaving it up to the odds, but the scriptwriter themselves has to decide.
yes, and I was thinking because
So even if it isn't an active choice, there is an implicit like moral ruling going on there.
No, you're right. I'm sorry. I was thinking because the coin is clearly there's two different sides now. That's like, oh, it's random. But no, he doesn't say the odds when he flips coins as Two-Face. He just flips them. It's like, we'll see what happens. And he does it. So you're right about that. Huh.
But like every other person who's considered a criminal, if they're not a cop, they get no like sob story or anything like that.
Which ones?
What do you mean, which ones?
Which other criminals are you speaking of?
Well, mostly that courtroom scene.
But that's also partially a joke. The huge grand number of people.
But the film still errs on the side of that being a good thing, that they're able to lock up all those people.
Yes. I think it's fascinating you're harking on these minor moments of the film.
I mean, that's what really stuck out to me, especially now.
Interesting.
Because the way Batman treats his adversaries in this series is a lot worse than, for example, the animated series.
Okay, I have no experience with the animated series. Go on.
I don't remember which one it was, but there was like, I think I've seen this one compilation of scenes where like he was dealing with one of the calendar man or something like that, who's going through like mental illness and stuff like that. Instead of like beating him up and like throwing him in jail, he's trying to actually help him. That's not something this version of Batman would do.
No. Is that possibly a reflection of the times?
Can you elaborate?
People weren't as woke in 2008 as they are now.
That animated series was from the 90s.
Yes, but that's also sure. But that's also a smaller amount of people watching it in the grand scheme of things, right? And you're not going to have that TV show didn't cost $185 million to make. You know, they're going to have more liberties than Nolan, who's just trying to get this giant movie out.
But then again, this also feels like the prototype for Snyder's version of this character.
I've only seen Batman v Superman. Go on.
Exactly.
Well, hold on. What do you define as Snyder's version of the character? Do you count Justice League?
No, I'm talking about Batman v Superman.
Okay. All I remember about Batman v Superman is it has my favorite Batman action sequence. The warehouse scene.
So what I'm specifically referring to is the idea that he brands them in that one, which is basically a mark for death.
Oh, yes. He is a much more violent Batman, right?
But that's not too far from the idea of what Batman's trying to do here. In this movie, he's trying to get them in prison for the rest of their lives. Whereas in that one, just kill them off. When it comes to the rest of society, it might as well be the same. But it is that one step further that is what caused people to not accept that one as much.
Wait, so did you just say that people would perceive a prisoner death and a prisoner sentence as the same thing?
No,
I that's my genuine trying to take
no,
in
no.
what you said.
I'm saying like that's where Snyder went too far. But he is just picking up and like taking the ball slightly further from where Nolan had it.
So Nolan's ball is
Pretty dark to begin with, and like not, as you said, morally gray, but like
again. I take it back to the boat scene. Which, hold on, can I just point out the only person of color with multiple lines is the scary looking dude who you're supposed to
Yeah.
think is bad when he stands up. Is like, give me the remote. Which, really, Nolan, really. But again,
what are you talking about? Joker is a person of color. All that makeup on his face, that's a lot of colors.
There are many colors. But again, does that not play into your initial perception of criminals and then understanding that there's a deeper person inside of them?
I don't know if
Because there is the question of, was he the only dude on that ship who wanted to throw away the remote? I don't think you could ignore that because it seemed like everyone was trying to get it. But because that is what happened and no one tried to stop him, I don't know.
But then again, that also comes back to the idea that like because they've done bad things in the past, quote unquote, they deserve to die.
Who said that other than most of that other boat?
They themselves accepted that.
Oh, that's an interesting choice. Was that not the selfless act to do in the moment?
I think it partially comes from the idea that like we're not worth saving.
But again, is that not selfless?
Part of me thinks it's
Again, it goes back to Nolan thinking that the best of humans will come out in the end, mostly because Harvey Dent gets messed up at the end.
I mean, I'm seeing it more in I could see that point of view, but the way I see it, which is okay, this might be arguing a little bit in bad faith because I definitely don't think this is what was intended.
Okay.
But the way I saw it was more like them accepting society's impression of who they are in that moment. That they are worthless and not worth it.
Huh. I don't know if in that moment one would think about society.
No, but like
when there's
again,
two
it's
separate
not
boats.
it's not explicit even in terms of their mentality.
Okay.
Like systemic racism isn't something you very much think about,
Sure.
which is it's not exactly what this is, but it's a similar sort
There's
of
totally an
thing.
element of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what I felt watching that.
Interesting. I have no other comebacks. That's I don't know. You present an interesting question.
I mean, this is mostly what was going through my mind while I was watching this movie, which is why it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Can we talk about the filmmaking aspects rather than analytical stuff right now?
Oh, move on to a lighter topic.
Maybe we're so deep in the hole that I don't know how to call out. I need like people chanting as I try to jump from one part of the hole to the other.
Spoilers for Dark Knight Rises.
Hey, I never mentioned that it was Dark Knight Rises. You made it a spoiler. I made it a
Well, see, I was trying to make sure people understand and like know that they should take into account. Because if people watch that movie and then they realize it's like, yo, that dude spoiled it for me without even telling me it's a spoiler.
see, so they didn't realize it was a spoiler until after.
No, but they'd
I was
be
making an
angry about
illusion.
that you wouldn't let them know that it was a spoiler.
I crafted an illusion for those who would recognize it. And so you spoiled it for the other people.
Well, I was just
You
letting
spoiled
them
that there
know
was a
what they were in.
hole. There is a hole in Dark Knight Rises. Is it in the plot? Possibly. Is it a physical hole? Possibly. But you spoiled that there is a hole.
Honestly, that might as well be a theme of that movie.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. I'm fascinated for that rewatch.
But speaking of how things are shot, I hate these fight sequences.
I like them better than Batman Begins.
You know why?
Because
A lot more cuts.
Yes. So many cuts.
Which works for that because
Did it?
it gave the idea that like he's everywhere and nowhere at once, and you can't tell where he's gonna come from, and it evokes that level of fear and anxiety a lot more. Whereas in this one, they're trying to actually show some of the fights, and oh my god, the choreography is bad.
I prefer these fight sequences than Begins.
I mean,
I'm okay with awkwardness in a man in tights punching people.
See, my thing is though, I saw moments where like you could tell he was just standing there waiting for the next person to like do their attack so he could block it rather than it took me out of the experience.
Come on, did you never do that when playing the Arkham games when there's like two people and you just wait for them for those marks to pop out for you to press Y or triangle to counter?
Listen, that doesn't mean it's realistic.
Sometimes you have to listen before you fight. Play on the defense. I prefer I also don't think of any of the action sequences in this movie ever when I think of this movie.
Which is funny
the car
considering
chase.
it's a superhero movie. This might be the one superhero series where like it's not really based on the fight sequences.
No. It's
because if it was, it would be no one would watch these movies.
I forgot there was that weird scene of him going after the mob boss in the club. And so he's like knocking fools off the railings. Like,
speaking of awkward jokes,
what was the joke there? Just the club?
No, the guy with his girlfriend where she was like, "It's too loud in here, we can't talk." And then he's like, I want to hear you talk. And then Batman shows up and beats the shit. Reminded me of John Wick.
I've only seen 3, and 3. Let me tell you, I have no clue what the hell happened in John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. I love that movie.
The first 2 are better.
I need to go through them eventually.
But like the first movie has an extended sequence in a nightclub, which feels like it might have been slightly inspired by this, and they saw this and were like, "Hey, that's a cool concept. We could definitely do that a lot better than it was done here."
I think we do need to mention the opening sequence.
Yeah. So the thing is, this movie is very good at building stakes.
Yes, very much so.
And the way that those rapid cuts happen, it's also good at showing gunshots, not so much as hand-to-hand combat.
Yes. I was shocked looking back that there's no blood or anything in these movies.
Well, isn't it like blood basically gets you an R rating?
Yeah, which I was unaware of. I never thought about it, but it's an odd thought.
Like the scene where after the guy who puts up the ransom, he sees him in the body bag and then he like cuts it. It always cuts to like behind or like not showing it, which also adds to the fear aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's more haunting when you don't see it.
And an element in that scene, other than the editing by Lee Smith, who was nominated for the Oscar, that is an element that's in that scene and throughout the entire film is the score.
Yes, that definitely heightens it.
Which I wasn't aware.
One bass hit or whatever it was, the drop.
I was unaware it's not just Hans Zimmer doing the score for these movies.
Hmm.
Nolan was like, "Hey Hans, you want to do Batman?" And he's like, "Hey, I've been wanting to collaborate with James Newton Howard. Can he join too?"
Hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, it's about the duality of one man. Let's have them." James Newton Howard, also known for Pretty Woman, The Fugitive, Space Jam, King Kong, Fantastic Beasts: Where to Find Them, and a number of M. Night Shyamalan's films.
It would be so great if Space Jam was re-released in theaters and that made $1 billion.
Let's see. As I bring
It's
up how
probably
much,
nowhere close.
can I bring up one fact I forgot to mention earlier?
What?
Batman Begins made 323 million worldwide. Dark Knight made 500 million domestically. That's an incredible jump.
Yeah.
It's a staggering jump. Space Jam made 230 million in 1996. I wonder how much that would be nowadays. Because that might be more like 400 or 500 million.
Mhm.
I'm sure I can find that out on Box Office Mojo. Shout out to Box Office Mojo for all our numbers. I hate the redesign you did last year, Box Office Mojo, but still
I'm
fun.
also not a fan of their YouTube content. Top
That's
10
Watch
list.
Mojo. Watch Mojo is different from Box Office Mojo.
It's not the same company?
I don't know if you're serious or not. They're not the same company.
I thought their logos were basically the same,
No,
except the
not
word
at
was
all.
slightly different.
Not at all.
Okay. Well, you learn something new every day.
I really do love the tunnel chase scene.
Despite that one moment.
Other than the dumb joke. Also, when he's like switching into the motorcycle mode, and there's the guys outside like, "Ooh, that's a cool looking thing." One of the great elements of these movies is that Nolan knows when to focus on score and when to not.
Mhm.
And with both Begins and Dark Knight, in the car chase sequences, there's no score, and if there is, maybe it's very low, but I'm pretty sure it's no score. It's all based on the sounds, the sound design, and
Right.
of the crashes, of Joker pulling out the bazooka, shooting it. You hear it zooming through the sky, and boom, smashing into the truck.
The sound of the engines.
Yeah, and
Like the sound of that Batmobile's engine really grounds you in like how much of a tank it is.
yeah. And even in the opening sequence, I'd say sound is such an important element. The score feels like is very much something like Hans would do later in Dunkirk, and it felt like there's this ticking timer going on, and then you get the shots of the guns and everything.
Well, I feel like the score also heightened those gunshots.
Yes, yes.
So on a technical level, this movie is very great.
Yeah.
I do enjoy it.
Again, totally respect Nolan as a filmmaker, not as a murderer of the English language in reflection of emotions. But I found in my third rewatch of this film, or third watch of this film, that it hit me emotionally in a way I was not expecting. Anything else you'd like to add about this this film?
I feel like I've barely talked about Harvey Dent.
Yeah, we barely touched on Harvey. You want to take? May I add one more filmmaking thing I really liked, and then we can get to Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
I very much enjoyed this film. Arguably has the most notable quotes of all of the films we've seen so far.
Yes.
I think Titanic's the only one you might be able to fight it with, but
Yeah, like that line, we were going to need a bigger boat.
that's my favorite line from Titanic. Because they were like, hey, we have the biggest boat of all time.
And then
dude
they
was
see
like,
the iceberg and it's like, we're going to need a bigger boat.
yeah. And then someone was like, hey, James, I think Spielberg may have used that line before. And James like, no, that's my own original line. And then it wasn't nominated for original screenplay at the Oscars.
Listen,
See what happens.
he was
Jim?
like, Spielberg might have said it, but I'm going to perfect it.
Oh, Well, the Academy didn't agree. Anyways, one of the most iconic lines is "Why so serious?" Right?
Well, I mean,
And
it's also because it's repeated.
yes,
There's a lot of repeating lines in this that aren't in either of the other films, I think.
yeah, you're right. Actually,
I think that's partially why they're
Nolan trying to
memorable.
hammer home, but I love the second time he does it because it's him at the fundraiser. He grabs Rachel. He's like, well, I know I got these. Oh no, it's not why so serious. It's why do I you know how I got these scars?
Yeah.
Um, and as Rachel's fighting him off, the camera spins around them in kind of this frantic emotion. And as Joker finally holds her, so they're eye to eye, the camera stops and takes place. And I like that little effect of the spinning out of control, and then Joker grabs her. I don't like the fact that Joker grabbed her, but cinematically, from a storytelling perspective, it was very effective.
Mm-hmm. So back to Harvey Dent.
Mr. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent.
A thing about these movies, both the first and the second one, it feels like they introduce a secondary villain mid-movie in a way that weirdly feels like it's not. It feels a little bit forced. In this one, it feels a little bit more natural than it did in Begins. But
Well,
the
in
fact that
in regards to Begins, there's a weird like half hour where there's kind of no clear force for Bruce to fight. Like they're teasing Scarecrow and they make you think Raj is dead. And so it's like randomly here's Scarecrow again. But you're right that it's a lot more smooth and seamless in this one.
yeah,
It's weirdly the first film is a Batman origin story. This one is a Two-Face origin story. Also an ending story, but also
yeah,
an
that's
origin
the
story.
thing. When I've seen this film many times.
Many a time.
One of the things that I felt, I don't know if I necessarily felt it this time, but like I felt it before, is that it feels weird that Harvey Dent is both introduced and killed off in this movie.
Oh, it's franchises would never do that nowadays.
Yeah, it feels like his story was really cut short.
Is that not the point? He was built up to be this great man who's going to save Gotham. Out of nowhere, tragedy strikes, and he's kind of the Joker. One bad day could change you, or whatever that mentality is, which I'm sure we'll get to in Todd Phillips's film. But I don't know.
The point of the Killing Joke is that that mentality is flawed.
I've never read it. I have time now. Maybe I'll read it by the time
It's
it gets
not
to Joker.
long.
Yeah, but then I would have to read. How often do you think I read?
Oh, I'll be honest. I haven't read it either, but I know the plot points.
How do you know?
Like,
How do you know the length of something you didn't read?
I know it's one issue.
So, Can the Hat is like 50, 60 pages.
I mean, this is like 80, but that's not too much.
But if I told you
Actually, is it 80? It might have been like 60 or something, but it was one. Whatever.
Go on. What are we saying about Two-Face?
Yeah, I was just saying how I mean what you said makes sense. That it is for that.
I do like the how it plays with the coin for the uninitiated viewer in that you don't realize that Nolan doesn't focus on the coin when it lands or before it lands. He just kind of does it, and you take him for his word for granted up until he reveals to Rachel that hey, they're both heads. And something about the creating your own luck and forging your own path, right, is kind of in this movie in the same way that the first one was like, hey, Bruce, I know you think you can't, but hey, you can change Gotham if you wanted to, right?
So one question I have.
Sure. I like questions. Hold on, let me take notes. I need to take notes. I got a clipboard. I got a whiteboard. Put my glasses. All right, let me take a note.
Is the ending suggesting that Batman should be taking accountability for his actions.
The actions being
His complete disregard for the law in the face of doing what is quote unquote right.
I've tasted this question. It
How
is
does it-
sitting in my mouth like fine wine, I assume.
I'm pretty sure listeners of this podcast could tell that we're not wine connoisseurs.
As it turns out, when you try to do a bit while you're thinking, it doesn't help thinking.
Gee, no whiz.
Huh.
I could see how that might be the function of it, but that's not how it comes across.
I don't think it is asking. Because is it not about selflessness again?
I guess
Batman,
it might. Yeah,
Batman, not Bruce, because Bruce is Batman. Batman could be like, hey, Dent went crazy. Why did I use that word? Dent went evil and killed everyone and caused madness.
Dent literally went Joker mode.
Yeah. But he chooses to sacrifice himself because he's the easier sacrifice, and that means more. Is this is the movie where they're talking about like him being a symbol, right? Or is that in both films?
That's in both. Because in the first movie is the thing where it's like, as a man I could be destroyed, but as a symbol I could be pure. I could be everlasting. That's one of the quotes from the video game. That's why I remember it.
I'm tempted to make the post-credit scene just you saying every line you remember from the video game. But there is that element of one person being bigger than one person. In Batman Begins, hey, you could change Gotham if you really try. In this, yeah, you're Batman, but you need to be the symbol. You need to be the Dark Knight. Harvey needs to be the White Knight. Is he called the White Knight? The Light Knight.
The White Knight.
The White Knight. I don't know.
One thing I remember as a kid is very much enjoying Harvey's speech when he's like, the Batman should come forward and like trying to quell those anxieties.
That is when he is giving the press conference, right?
Yes. But like upon rewatch, it feels a lot more clunky than I remember it. Like the pontificating just feels a little out of place considering the amount of directness of everything happening around it.
Eckhart is an interesting case for me in this film because I don't think he's bad. It does feel like he's a little more on and a little pulpy and over the top in a way I was mentioning, like the mobsters were earlier, more so than I found Joker to be, more so than Rachel is. Is that it? It does feel like the character has two modes of, hey, I'm running. What is he? He's not the DA. What is he?
He is the DA.
He's the DA. Wait, so she's the assistant to the DA.
Yes.
What was she in Batman Begins?
Same role.
So Rachel, right, doing great work as the assistant to the DA, saves a little boy. Next movie, this dude out of nowhere becomes the DA, and she's just the assistant again. Nolan,
She didn't know how to play politics.
Nolan, is my mic on? I hope. Oh.
Was it off?
No, it's on. I kept it on from last week, but there's a moment where I was like, I didn't check if it's on or not. But there's no complaint. Anyways, Nolan, why didn't you give Rachel a promotion? She deserved it.
Well, to be fair, DA, as that they explained in this movie, you had to run for election. So
That's
it's like
fair.
up to the public.
That's fair. And we know society sexist.
Exactly.
But yeah, I found and it's not bad the work he does, but Eckhart is a little more over the top, scene chewy. Did I say scenes chewy?
You said scene chewy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and so I'm not the biggest fan of his role and his performance, but I think he's solid work.
He I feel like he fits more with Joker than anyone else in this movie.
How so? Other than them being the villains.
No, I mean in terms of performance also.
How so?
Like the most potent scene was definitely the one with them in the hospital. That's the one that felt the most. That scene itself felt like the one where there was a clear intent of purpose and they achieved it to the best of their ability, more so than the rest of the scenes, where there was always something off.
Is it possibly, and I'm just pondering here, just tossing this out there. Is it possibly because they're both men of facades that this is the one time their facades are down?
Mm-hmm.
Again, just tossing that out there. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's correct. I don't know if it makes. I don't know if I believe in it.
I mean, it's definitely also the fact that the script doesn't have any faults in that moment. Well, I mean, we could talk about the script being a problem, but like we don't have no idea what was a script decision as opposed to what they decided to do on
Sure.
set that
Sure.
day
Sure.
or in the editing room.
Sure. I forgot what line it was, but there's a line that Katie Holmes has in Batman Begins. Where I'm like, that's the take you chose, Nolan? So that means either Nolan picked a really bad take,
Or that was the best one.
or yeah, that was
they
the
had.
best one, and Katie Holmes was that bad. And I don't like either of those possibilities. I was like, really? It was like her reaction to like, oh, it's her reaction to Bruce being like, hey, I'm Batman. And she says Bruce in like the weirdest way.
It's not what I am underneath. It's what I do that defines me.
And she's like,
Bruce? That was also from the video game.
it wasn't even like that. She said in I don't even know. It was a weird read. It was a weird delivery.
But I remember those lines.
Again,
it was in the video.
Save it for the post-credit scene.
You could just
gotta
edit
keep
those
them-
together.
Oh, then I have to edit this out and then edit it again. Like, give me so much work. One thing I'd like to note. It's less so in Dark Knight. I think there's elements of it more so in Begins. Is this a weird shift Nolan does in the stealthy Batman scenes, where he shifts to the perspective of the criminals
Mhm.
while Batman sneaks around, which I just thought was an interesting change. Not that it's bad. It's just in a Batman film, you take someone else's perspective, but I guess that's the only way to build the tension and the fear of him sneaking around, right?
Right. Because if you're following him around, you don't really get the mystique of Batman that the film and like the idea of the symbol is trying to build up. Because if you're following him around, it reduces him down to a man that has to move around like a normal human being.
Yes. And now I want to see those scenes.
It's like, where are you? He just walks across the room in the dark.
I feel like that's just about all we have. Is there anything else you want to discuss?
Which did you prefer, Batman Begins or Batman The Dark Knight?
Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that beginning of Batman Begins.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. It's weird because it seems like both Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises have these iconic opening scenes for the film, right?
Well, I mean, Dark Knight Rises, I'm pretty sure they got their cue based on how well the reception was to the opening scene of this, because it is almost the same concept at least.
Sure. The reveal of the villain. Nolan knows how to reveal a character, whether it's the Joker reveal, whether it's the Two-Face reveal, whether it's the first time Bruce says I'm Batman in Batman Begins. Like, ooh, that's a fun moment. It would have been fun to watch in theaters with a fun crowd cheering at those moments, reacting.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're about at the end of our analysis. Shout outs to Gary Oldman and Morgan Freeman, who do terrific work.
Yes, I
As
agree.
smaller supporting characters, but you need and Michael Caine. Michael Caine. How do we forget Michael Caine?
Again, all of Batman's help are just these great actors who don't really get much to work with. I mean, Michael Caine has some good monologues.
But they do it so well.
I very much enjoyed Michael Caine's musings about his time in Burma.
Okay, that's a Bruce in Burma. Am I doing the Cockney accent right? I was never good at the Cockney accent.
No.
Oh, God.
There's too much.
Oh, I was doing Alan Rickman. Mr. Potter.
Not yet.
Is it at least a good Alan Rickman? Ho. Now
I don't remember. It's been a while.
Mr. Potter. Or if I just do Cockney like Lin-Manuel Miranda in Mary Poppins Returns. No,
you got to do Cockney like Dick Van Dyke in the original Mary Poppins.
Oh yeah, Dick Van Dyke. Oh, it's a jolly holiday with Mary. Yeah, we're done.
All right, final thoughts on The Dark Knight.
I'll be honest, I was expecting to dislike it a little bit more, but God, this is a modern classic for a reason.
So, in retrospect, I'm glad my aunt gave me a copy of Batman Forever.
Okay.
Because even though that was campy, it at least knew what it was and did it really well.
Interesting. And R.I.P. Joel Schumacher, who was it this year he died, right?
I think so, yeah.
May have been 8 years ago. I've lost all sense of time, but I believe it was this year, which was kind of random.
Like, many people wouldn't consider his films to be like classics or whatever, but you could tell they're a lot of fun and they had fun.
Oh yeah, it does. I've never seen Batman and Robin. I saw one day when I was
I haven't seen Batman and Robin, but Batman Forever is great.
Well, one day when I was like fresh off Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, I was flipping through the channels as one used to do, right? And on G4 TV, Batman Forever is on.
You're talking about the video game channel?
Yeah, it's gonna come back, dude. It's gonna come back and talk about video games on the television. Yo,
is Olivia Munn coming back?
She left that channel before it ended. But yeah, it was like halfway through and I jumped in, and that's all my experience with Batman Forever. I enjoyed it. That random afternoon in like 2011 where I watched it, but
Jim Carrey was a great Riddler.
Jim Carrey, it just occurred to me we're not going to talk about Jim Carrey at all in this series. Can you take a second to just appreciate how great Jim Carrey is?
Yeah.
There's that second. Go watch Truman Show, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Two films that I think about very often.
Yeah. Man on the Moon. You ever see Man on the Moon?
No. But I saw the documentary on Netflix.
Oh, Jim and Andy and the Great Beyond, featuring contractually obligated
Tony Clifton.
Yes, I used to know that title off the top of my head. That's a great documentary. Go watch.
He's
the
such
Great
an
Beyond.
asshole.
He is.
And like the thing is, we were talking about method acting earlier.
And that's what people think it is.
And like, yeah, I like those movies, but I don't know if I want to watch Man on the Moon now because of that documentary.
It's such an odd thing. It's not like he. It seemed like everyone got something good out of that experience, though, which is the weird part. Right?
Maybe. I haven't seen the documentary in a while. I just remember everyone being like, "Oh, it was a pain to work with him."
Yeah. But I think everyone at the end was like, "Oh yeah, it was a yeah." Watch that movie if you haven't, because that really is something. I feel like I saw Jim Carrey in something recently that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the first season of Kidding on Showtime. Never got to
Are we
run season
pulling up
2.
the Jim Carrey IMDb?
I think it's time to move on.
All right.
Because, it's a lot of fans of this film. A lot of people enjoy this talkie, but it's not a perfect talkie.
No, it is not.
And so I think it's time for us to take this talkie and make it sing. Let's make this movie better.
All right.
Juan, I forget if it's your turn or my turn to do it. Who wants to go first?
I feel like every time I suggest you go first.
So do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Awesome.
So, what was my main gripe with this movie?
Criminals?
How they treated the criminals and how they had no respect for the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, what's a piece of media that's all about respecting the criminal justice system? Law and Order.
Go on.
Basically, what I wanted what I'd do for this movie is I'd have the first half be Batman chasing after the Joker.
Okay.
And then in the second half, much like in the film itself, he's arrested, but he stays in jail and he has his day in court, and that's the second half of the movie. Much like an episode of Law and Order.
It turns into a courtroom drama.
Yes.
So
Which would also give more time for Joker to Joker, because he'd be like put on the stand at one point and it would just be him going off.
Are you done with your pitch? I don't want to interrupt. Because I have many a question.
And like, this is also the one Batman movie, the one big Batman movie where he does a bit of detective work, which is something we didn't bring up.
He does.
And like, I'd like to see that aspect of it bolstered in the first half of the movie, where like he's building his case against Joker, and that Batman literally in costume shows up to court as the person, as like the prosecutor. And he's like, "Your Honor, this man deserves to be behind bars." That's the Dark Knight I want to see.
So many questions. Are you adding on to the original film, or is this a complete redo?
I'm adding on in the sense that I'm adding on up until, like, I take away the second half of the movie. Harvey Dent doesn't become Two-Face.
Okay.
Instead, he's working with Batman on the prosecution.
So basically you're keeping up into the car chase scene.
Yes.
When it turns out, which we completely ignored, the fake out death of Gordon. And he's like, "You're coming into court, kid." And then cut to the courtroom drama.
Yes. And then
changes a lot.
And then like we could get another, instead of having that scene where Harvey Dent like treats the person as hostile, which that's not how that works, but like we'll gloss over that for now. Have that scene with Joker.
Wait, so which Harvey Dent scene is this?
It's the one where the guy's like, "Hostile, I'll show you hostile." Then he pulls out the gun and then he grabs the gun and punches him in the face. It's like, "Yeah, that's what you do to crime."
I genuinely do not remember the scene.
It was like the introduction of Harvey Dent.
Oh, okay. In the courtroom?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
So like,
you
did
that scene in the beginning already, and then you do the same thing at the end in the same way that Nolan repeats lines from the beginning and the end.
Yeah, it's juxtaposition.
Juxtaposition. Wow, that's a big word. It's quite the big word.
And then like maybe at the end of this movie, Joker escapes. And Harvey Dent's like, I don't trust the system anymore. I can't make my own luck. Let me burn off the second half of this coin. I must become the Two-Face. There's my pitch.
Well done, well done, well done. I'll be honest, every time you bring up like criminals and the system, my mind is thinking. So I just watched Trial of the Chicago 7.
Mhm.
So I keep thinking of bringing that up when that's not the movie we're discussing. Like those topics and ideas are mixing with Dark Knight and Batman Begins. All right. Are you ready for me to fix this film?
Go on.
Hey, Christopher Nolan. Hey, Chris. From one Chris to another Chris. Here's some advice. So, Nolan, you're known for influencing many franchises to come with your Batman franchise. This dark grittiness, which you would see in stuff like James Bond. I'd argue you see it reflected in the art of video games after, both the maturity of the blockbuster and video games at the same time. But there's one thing you missed out on. One thing that you were behind on in the game, which later on in 2008 would be revolutionized by the MCU's Iron Man. The post-credit scene. And so, this is what you do, right? Have the credits start. And then it's like, The Dark Knight. Boom. And Hans Zimmer and James Horner have that like chord that it stands on, right? It's a hum. It's a hum. And then you pan up from the wreckage of Harvey falling down. You find Gordon with his son standing there looking out to Batman. Oh, Batman, where are you going? And then Gordon's daughter walks up next to them. And she's crying. And Gordon's like, oh, it's okay, honey. He had to leave. It's the right thing to do. And then she's like, Dad, why am I not your favorite? Because if you remember, Harvey's like, which one of them do you care about most? And he points at the mom, Barbara. He points at the daughter. And he points at the son, James Jr. Now notice the daughter, no name. Let's call her Jolly.
Gotta go with a J name.
And so she's like, Dad, why am I not your favorite? He's like, no, I love you too. If you were shot, I would care a lot. End scene, right? But that's not it. That's the mid-credit scene, all right? We know Marvel. We know the standard now. You have the mid-credit scene, maybe multiple mid-credit scene, and you have the post-credit scene.
Yeah, you gotta have the movie after the movie.
So the credits roll, credits roll, credits roll, credits roll. Cut to Lucius Fox. He types his name. Lucius. Hits enter with a smile on his face. And then pops up in the window. Error, error. He types in his name again. Error. Lucius goes, that dumb fuck misspelled my name. And he keeps trying to fix the spelling of his name. And error, error. Error, error. Error, error, error.
Too many
error,
tries.
Error, error. Too many tries. This system will remain open for the next 3 years. Thank you.
One thing I will note is that you decided to, trail off midway through his name as if you yourself didn't know how to spell it.
Do I know how to spell Lucius?
Which adds credibility to the idea that Batman wouldn't either.
He's the world's greatest detective. How many detectives have won a spelling bee? How many?
Fair point. Fair point.
So, viewers, listeners, those are how we would improve this film. Do you prefer Law in Bat Order or Nolan stealing the one thing that makes the MCU film special?
You know, you brought up a good point in the way you fixed it. Nolan is definitely not equal with the sexes.
No, not at all. There's one female character that speaks in both of the first two movies, and she's killed. Also, I noted Nolan has awkwardly placed humor often, but I think by keeping them at the end, the post-credit scene, you know to laugh then. It doesn't cut the tension. Like, I initially thought the scene where the dude's like trying to blackmail Bruce Wayne was so oddly placed because I forgot they bring him up later on. We completely skipped over. I forget they bring him back later on. So I was like, this is a weird scene that just comes out of nowhere.
Again, it's one of those things where we mentioned how we preferred him as Bruce Wayne, but we didn't talk about it because it's barely there.
Yeah. So we there's stuff we liked about this movie, stuff we didn't like about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But those
are our opinions.
Yeah, opinions aren't facts.
They're subjective.
Subjective.
We want to enjoy art the way it's supposed to be. With objective facts. Because everyone knows art can only be truly enjoyed from an objective point of view. So now we go into the segment where we rank this movie among the other movies in this list in a truly objective manner.
I will be sharing my screen to reveal the objective truth of the law machine.
And we will see where our current standings are with past episodes.
Let's start with our current standings. At number, let's scroll down. At number 37, last week's title, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. At number 19, Titanic. At number 3, Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. This is the official ranking of the films to gross over $1 billion worldwide.
The objective official ranking.
Mm-hmm. Now, Pawan, it's your turn.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to last week's film, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest.
Should we do it that way or should we go down the list?
Pawan? We discussed this last week.
Okay.
Compared to Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, do you like The Dark Knight better or worse?
I'd say equal.
You broke the system. You broke the system. We can't do the numbers that way.
Yes, we can.
Do you like it better or worse than Dead Man's Chest?
Again, I can't say it's better or worse.
All right, let's try something different. Let's go to the week before. Do you like it better or worse than Lord of the Rings, Return of the King?
Worse. It's worse than Return of the King.
So let's go to the next one. Do you like it better or worse than Titanic?
It's worse than Titanic.
Okay, so we have our scale.
There we go.
So it will be somewhere between number 19 Titanic and 37 Pirates of the Caribbean.
Wait, but I said it's equal, so it can be lower.
No. Because it's
again, this is just taking our subjective opinions.
The max is 36. The min is 20.
That's not fair.
Can't believe you broke the system already.
Okay, now you're getting a little too
You
subjective.
broke the system. You broke the system.
I say the way...
I'm going to hit the damn button.
I think the way it should work.
The damn button says 32. The Dark Knight is the 32 greatest film to ever cross the $1 billion mark.
So now you're interfering with the objective nature of the system. I think the way it should have worked is you should have went from 20 to 47. And if it came up at 37, you hit the number again. Or go one above or one under.
If it's equal to Dead Man's Chest, how could it be less than it?
That's where the objective fact comes in terms of the number crunching.
One. No more bits. There's a real moment, all right?
I'm genuinely
There's a real moment, all right? I created this goddamn podcast. It was my idea. I crafted and invented these machines that will rank the films. All right?
Damn, you're
You dare come into this Zoom chat and tell me how to work my number system?
can't wait for EFAP to see this podcast and realize that we are not the arbiters of objective fact. They're going to come down on us so hard, Miss Simpson, and you won't even see it coming.
I prefer Happy Eeyore to you.
Well, joke's on you. I am happy Eeyore.
I need a second. Bruce? So number 32 on our list last night. So let's go over the list once more. Pawan, what's that number 37?
We got Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest.
And above that, number 32, The Dark Knight.
That is phonetic spelling. Sure.
And what's above that?
At number 19, we got Titanic.
And all the way at number 3, the third greatest film to ever cross the $1 billion mark. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. What a list so far. What a list. We're learning so much about society nowadays.
I mean, Joker himself says it really says a lot about society.
Really.
Like the
Really
fact
does.
that we live in one.
Ah, you're spoiling stuff again.
Really?
Does he talk about societies in this one?
No, I'm pretty sure that's only in the Joker movie, which I
Yeah.
haven't seen, so I can't effectively spoil. Ha!
Frank, I apologize to our listeners that I may have spoiled a movie. That's how I'll
Question
regard
mark?
it. A movie.
Just watch that ends up being better than Return of the King.
You know what else is a movie? Next week's film, 2009's Avatar. Hey, Jimmy Cameron,
Hell yeah, it's a movie.
we're going to see you again. For those of you who are joining us and watching, this film is now available on the Disney Plus streaming service. A second film from Disney. Kind of. We'll get into that later.
There's a lot of movies from Disney coming.
Yes.
Whoa, wait.
So,
No, next week we're talking. Oh, wait. Next week
Avatar.
that's
Disney now.
2009. Yes.
Yeah, Disney now owns Avatar.
Right. And the week after that, we talk about Alice in Wonderland.
And the week after that, Toy Story 3. A trilogy of Disney. Which, you know, we had a week off from Disney. I miss Disney. I think we need to go back to Walt. But we need to tread
mean-
lightly with Walt.
Miss is a strong term.
With that, I am Christian Simpson.
I am Pawan Mehta, aka Happy Eeyore.
Any shout outs you want to throw out? I like to shout out Max.
Shout
Lismacchio.
out to Max Lismacchio
Yeah.
for the image that precedes this podcast.
Precedes the video. If you're listening on a streaming service, it is the art. I might
Exactly.
have
It
to burp right now.
precedes you actually listening to it because you look at it and then you click it and that's when you listen. So it precedes the podcast.
You're correct. I'm sorry. I questioned your analogy. Analogy? Your train of thought. So thank you again for watching, for listening.
Thank you.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The $1 Billion Movie Club.
Or
Find us-
follow us on whatever podcast service you prefer.
Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, a rock. Like how
We're
the
on
cavemen.
SoundCloud, right?
We'll talk about that. Leave a comment or a review. Let us know how
And
we're
also
doing.
let us know how you'd make these movies better.
Yeah. How would you make it better? Who had the better suggestions?
And how you feel about this objective ranking.
Yes. Should it be number 32? We'll find out.
And also remember, the objective ranking is neither of our opinions. Even
No.
though Miss Simpson kind of let a peek behind the curtain slip out.
I'm sorry that sometimes you have to break the fourth wall, drop character. We cannot all be method actors like one Jared Leto. We must drop the facades like Joker and Harvey Dent did in that one scene you love so much.
Yeah, not everyone can jizz into a piece of mail and then mail it.
When you
I feel
started
like
that,
that's the most adult that we're gonna get on this podcast.
when you started that sentence, I thought you were gonna say peach. I'm like, why are you bringing up "Call Me by Your Name"? But turns out, jizz is a running theme in cinema. There's something about Mary, Call Me by Your Name, Suicide Squad.
Hey, was Jared Leto wasn't even in Call Me by Your Name? Why
no,
did you
there's
think of the
jizz.
peach?
The jizz.
Oh.
You said jizz in. I'm like, what would when?
And your first thought is a peach. That reminds me of the Key and Peele sketch, Practice on a Peach.
I don't know this sketch. I will look it up.
All right.
I'm sure it's a fun sketch. So thank you again for listening and watching. Ta-ta
And
for
join
now.
us next week when we talk about Avatar. All right. Goodbye.
Wanna know how I got these scars? Oh.
As a man, I could be destroyed, but as a symbol, I could be pure. As I could be everlasting. What symbol? Bruce?
And I'm vamping along. 'Cause Pawan is gone. They went to make a tinkle or a poopy. Which one we'll find out? Yes, we'll see. What did they do? What did they do? One or two. What did they do? What did they do in the bathroom? Boom, boom.